everyone. Welcome. I'm Liz Wiseman, and welcome to our very first run of Leadership Matters, which is going to be a series, maybe a show, but maybe something more like a conversation than a show, where we deal with some of the hard matters of leadership, the issues, the challenges that matter to you, that matter to your team. And we're going to apply the principles from our research. We're going to pool our collective know-how, not just our know-how in the Wiseman group, but the know-how that is assembled here in this session, and help find good answers to some of these really challenging leadership situations. Now, like everything that we do at the Wiseman group, the session is going to be interactive. So we'll share a few ideas. We're going to ask you to share your insights, and we are going to take on a number of challenges in each session, a couple that we've planned for, and then a few that we're going to just address real time. I want to introduce you to a few of the members of the Wiseman group that are going to be doing this. First of all, I'm Liz. Let me see, what do I do here? I research, I write, I teach, repeat. That's kind of my job. I am here in our little studio at the Wiseman Group World Headquarters. And I'm here with Shawn Vanderhoven, who is my partner, collaborator, heads all of our work with clients, our leadership development practices. Is Shawn Vanderhoven, who is in his bananas shirt today. And it is so apropos because he's like bananas about the work that we do. Okay, in addition to me and Shawn, we are going to be joined here by Lauren Hancock, who I think is coming on camera right now. Lauren is our head of research. She is also our chief nerd. And it is a title that she wears kind of like a crown inside the Wiseman group. Lauren is just one of these people who's got a mind who, like, when you are like in the ring dealing with a tough challenge, a tough piece of work, she's someone that you just want in your corner. And she is going to be in our corner as we're dealing with these challenges. She's going to back check some stuff for us. She is also going to be available to do what we're going to call Ask a Nerd. So when we want to get some evidence-based guidance, we're going to go to Lauren. She's prepared a few things, but man, she's fast too, and she's going to pull that together. And then running our show here is Austin Plyler, who is leads our marketing effort. So Austin, say hey to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
So today's session, we're going to focus on having hard conversations. And it's specifically those hard conversations where somebody doesn't quite share the same perception of themselves that the people that are working around them share. And a few months ago, we reached out to a host of you on email, and we invited people to send us questions about leadership and the workplace in general. 48% of the questions that came in surrounded this theme that it's centered in having these tough feedback questions. And so, we're going to focus on this because it seems like feedback is this perennial leadership problem.
Always a challenge.
Who doesn't
constant
have
challenge for leaders?
A challenge giving feedback to somebody. And so we're going to take on 3 challenges. The first 2 challenges are challenges that you've sent to us, that we've selected from this list of this 48% that came in. And then the third challenge is going to be fun. What we're going to do is we're going to take one live from you all, a challenge that someone is struggling with. And we'll bring up some success criteria for that challenge when we get there, so you all can submit them and we can select one, and then we're going to discuss this together as a team.
Yeah. Now, as we do this, and as we run these Leadership Matters sessions, we're going to try to find good answers, but this is far less about finding the right answer and a lot more about finding a smart way forward, and really looking at some of these challenges, the hard stuff of being a leader, and looking at them through what we call in Impact Players opportunity goggles. So I brought my opportunity goggles. These were given to me by the good folks at Gooder, and I think these are just the best possible rendition of opportunity goggles.
And I'm feeling a little naked without mine, because
I'm gonna give them to you because you were meant for these. What we're going to try to do is look at these hard issues rather as, man, this is an annoyance, this is actually an opportunity. And maybe the bananas and the goggles are perfect. That this is an opportunity for me to demonstrate good leadership. This is an opportunity for me to provide information that helps people hit the right target. This is an opportunity for me to add value. This opportunity to build trust, to build a relationship, to really create a workplace where people can show up and do their very best work. So we're going to try to find the opportunity in all of these challenges, which is one of the hallmarks of impact players. Okay, so we're ready to take on our first challenge here. Now, I think we've got a description of this challenge. We picked two that were submitted in advance, and this is sent by someone with initial R. And if you are here and want to join us, go ahead and join us online. But here it is. I can read it better here. I'm a new people manager. My direct report is a solid contributor, but I perceive that she is, let me read it here where I can see it better. I'm a new people manager. My direct report is a solid contributor, but I perceive that she may think she's a top contributor. How do I communicate to her that she needs to step it up in a way that is inspiring rather than demotivating? Yeah. So what do you think of that one, Shawn?
Well, this is interesting. What's the heart of this issue here? I mean, what do you think?
I think there's kind of what at the heart of it on the surface is about mismatched perceptions. Is someone thinks they're a superstar and their manager has a very different view. And I think anyone who has managed people have been in this situation where that person's view of their performance does not match yours or the larger group's view of their performance. But I think we could dig a little deeper on this one. And it's not just about aligning those perceptions. I think this is also a matter of maybe somebody who's missing signals. Someone who isn't able to calibrate their work in a way that's hitting the target. Now I want to go to some of our research on, we're gonna dig into a couple ideas from books, some of ours, some from other authors. But one of the things that we noticed when we studied impact players was, these impact players were these standout contributors, created value everywhere they went. They were, just seen as superstars in all that they did. And we compared them against ordinary contributors. But the part of the research that we don't spend a lot of time on in the book is what we came to call under contributors. I was fascinated by the people that managers said were under contributors, meaning people who were contributing below their capability level, because this situation smacks to me as an under contributor, because the under contributors were people who were smart, who were capable, who were hardworking, and often who saw themselves as superstars because on paper they absolutely were, and they were working hard. And so it's very easy for them to see themselves as a top performer, but yet their leaders, their managers saw them as under contributors. And it was often because they were working really hard and they were highly skilled and they were brilliant. They were kind of doing their thing rather than the thing. And so one of the things I wonder about in this situation is maybe this isn't a skill gap. Maybe this isn't even a performance gap. Maybe this is an application gap, which is this person is working on the wrong things. Or they're just not aligned with what's hot and with what's important. So that's one of the things I would dig into. What would you start to dig into?
Well, let's do this. I've got a question for everybody on. So for all of those that are familiar with multipliers, think about this from a leadership perspective. If you got this question, which again was that you've got this contributor, they're solid, but they think, but they think that they're a top contributor, but they're under contributing. What would you say, put into chat from a leadership perspective, like what are the things that you would need to consider first as a leader? If you're in this situation, or maybe you have a manager that reports to you and they come to you and they explain the situation and you start thinking about multipliers and what you know about leadership, like what are the principles that you would immediately want to consider here from a leadership perspective?
So what are the go-to principles?
Yeah, like right after we got Sarah says that that the leader the leader clearly communicated expectations. Okay, yeah, keep
this
going.
This is a really good question, because often performance problems are because we haven't let people know here's where to channel your performance.
Yeah. While we're getting some of these, in so we can consider more of your thinking. I was running a team of 30 developers, which was kind of a disaster to them.
Software developers.
And every single time that I would sit down to have like a performance review, not really, kind of like a check-in, because people were underperforming, I thought it was interesting. It was kind of maybe an early management situation for me. I recognized that was 8 out of 10 times I could see how it wasn't clear what winning looked like, what the expectation looked like. So I'm trying to give them feedback on, hey, here's what I really want you to be doing. And then in return, they would kind of be like, yeah, but like, you didn't communicate that to me.
Yeah, I find this all the time when I look at the output of someone's work. I'm like, that does not match the picture I had in my head about, like, whoa, that is not at all what I was expecting. And then I formulate this picture in my mind and I realize I don't think I ever communicated that picture.
Yeah.
And, it is one of the things that we find good multiplier leaders do is they communicate, here's what success looks like. One of my favorite little techniques on this is the 3 whats. It's like when you give someone a piece of work, have you been clear? Here's what great looks like. Here's what done looks like. And here's what's out of bounds. Like, here's what you just don't need to worry about. And that helps create that picture. That might be one of the things that's going on. What else might be going on here?
Let's see here. Look at playing fewer chips. Are there opportunities to clearly encourage making more contributions in their workplace? So maybe the idea is that it is the problem because the leader's overplaying. I mean, from an accidental diminisher perspective, like, I think right off the bat I have the tendency to be an idea. I've got a bad combo. It's idea fountain with being a bit of a rescuer and a perfectionist.
Ooh.
Yeah, it can be pretty gnarly. And I remember when I first learned about the concept and was like staring myself in the mirror on, ooh, how big of an accidental diminisher I am. It was pretty obvious. And then you throw a little bit of always on in there, which, addresses this directly. I can see how many of the times that I was in a situation where people thought they were contributing higher than what I was envisioning, like you mentioned, it's probably because I was playing pretty big and there was just not enough space for them. Okay, what else? What else do you
There's
see
all
here,
sorts of
Liz?
good stuff here. There's one here, and Kira's talking about, like, something to look at would be their previous performance reviews, their colleague input. Like, do they have a track record of being maybe under contributing? Or is this something that's changed as they've gotten into a new environment or a new manager? What are the other questions you would ask? And maybe that's, Shawn has asked you, what principles would you go to? And, one of the principles I would go to is this idea, and it's just at the very heart of multipliers, is that for people to be brilliant and to do their best work, they need information. They need information about what's important. They need information about how they're doing. They need, like, that kind of, you're getting warmer, you're getting cooler. Like, people need information to be smart.
Right.
That might be one of the principles I would go to here. And part of that information is they need information about this gap between how they see themselves and how the manager is seeing them. Like, that is vital information that they need to get somehow. But also on chat, would you put in, what would be the questions you would ask? Like diagnostic questions. If you are in this person's role as this manager, what would you stop and ask yourself before jumping into action?
And so while you all were writing, I like what Sue put in here. She says, let's talk about your work. I lost it here. Let's go and look at what we agreed upon. So no, let's go at weight what we agreed upon. Do they line up? So, like, let's make sure that we're on the same page. What's getting in the way? Do you know how to do it? Do you have the tools to do it? Do you like it? Are some questions. Let's see what else do we have here.
While those are coming in, Shawn, one of the things that is a fundamental challenge in this particular challenge is that self-perception isn't matching manager's perception. And this is one where we want to ask a nerd on this. And, I want to go to Lauren and say, like, help us understand kind of what are the dynamics of people how accurately do we assess our own performance? Okay, Lauren, you've kind of dug into some of this. What'd you find?
Yeah, essentially, one thing that research consistently shows is that we do not assess our own performance very well. Probably most of us are familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, if not in name, then at least in concept. It's the phenomenon where low performers on a test or a task tend to overestimate their own performance. So basically, when we're bad at something, we have a hard time saying exactly how bad we are. But there are a lot of theories about why this happens. There have been many, many replications of this study that apply it to different industries and skills. But one thing that is a pretty clear pattern across all of these replications is that while low performers struggle to assess their own skill and they tend to overestimate that skill, they don't generally mistake themselves for high performers with regards to that skill. In other words, like they know they're bad at the skill, they just don't know how bad they are. Maybe you scored a 28 and you thought you scored about a 40. You probably didn't think you scored a 95 on this particular test. So in general, when it comes to any given skill like that, you're working with maybe a vague, optimistic cluelessness, but not like outright delusion.
We have to pause on
Did you
this.
say that again?
Or did you just say a vague, optimistic cluelessness?
Yeah.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah. And that might seem antithetical to what we've been saying here about someone who really is an underperformer thinking that they are a rock star. But what's important to remember is that the Dunning-Kruger effect and all of the measurable accounts of this phenomenon aren't talking about overall intelligence. It's not, you know, something like, I am a great performer at work. That's like an aggregate assessment of the self, not a specific skill. So if someone is, if you're seeing that kind of wide gap, it might be because they're assessing themselves on the wrong skills. And if you want to improve how they are assessing themselves, make sure they're assessing themselves on the right collection of skills and improve that assessment by giving training on how to evaluate themselves, a really specific rubric that brings clarity to it, a frame of reference, like context about what a great performance looks like, are all things that have been shown in various studies to improve our ability to self-assess.
Interesting. And, you know, Lauren, I would add to that, when someone has an inkling that they might not be doing something well, that they're closer to 48 than 95 on this, I notice that often a little bit of panic sets in. And then it's a little bit of that ostrich head down, which is, I have this feeling something's not going exactly right. And that makes me nervous. And so instead of gathering that intel, it's let me pretend that this is all going just fine. Which
they move from being overly confident to then super insecure. And then that causes the ostrich move.
And sometimes there's an outward projection. And I've seen that when looking at diminishing leaders, like they have a sense that maybe they're not leading in the best ways, but they're nervous about it. There's a little bit of insecurity that comes up of like, I have a sense that like I might be suffocating people, but I don't know what to do about it. So let me just pretend I'm doing a great job. Okay, Lauren, thank you for that insight. So given that there's this perception gap here, like how do we get someone the information they need to be able to do a really amazing job? And there's lots of great comments here on chat. And this is one of those situations where there's more coming in that I can process. Andrew, thank you for this. Like, what questions would you ask a person who's in this situation? One of the themes I'm seeing in what people would do about this is like, I would ask them how they're doing. Now, let's look at our options here, as we've got just a couple more minutes to dig into this scenario, which I think, I don't know, maybe virtually everyone here has dealt with this. I know I've dealt with this situation so many times. I've probably handled some of those poorly. Maybe you've done it right a time or two. You know, one option is to kind of hold that insight in your tank and like package that into the upcoming performance review. Like, you
Mhm,
know what?
mhm.
Let me wait till we've got the next performance cycle. I can sit down, share this observation, help close this gap, and I'll do it in the bigger picture context of here's what you're doing well, and here's some growth areas. That might be one approach.
It reminds me of a leader that we interviewed, actually, the CEO of Gooder. His name's Stephen Lass.
You just wanted to put
Did I
those goggles
pronounce
on.
it? Lass or Lease? I might have murdered his name, but here's what he did. He was struggling to give. He had this problem where people were under contributing what he was hoping for. He's running a startup. It's fast paced. And he realized that he needed to actually create some kind of a permission, a framework that he could regularly go and give people radically honest feedback, like Kim Scott's talked about. So what he did is he went and made an agreement. He brought everybody together and he said, hey, I'd like to ask for everybody's permission for you to give me radically honest feedback when you think I'm underperforming. But I'd like the same thing. I'd like to be able to give you feedback immediately if I think that you're underperforming, so we can negotiate the buffers, the difference, so we can figure out how we can get there. But he said that what that did was, they called it holding a clearing. So you would go to somebody and you'd say, hey, can I clear
Trying
something
so
with
hard
you?
to make eye contact with you, Shawn. I can't see you. Okay, there we go.
So imagine this. So after he made this agreement, so this was the keywords, the code words were, hey, can I clear something with you? And they call it holding a clearing.
I like it.
And it was based on this idea that there's going to be times when we're going to have unmet expectations on performance, but let's just set up the agreement now that it's okay for us to say that to each other. And he said that what that did for him was it helped him be able to move to that quickly, so he could pull somebody, right after the disappointment of maybe a deliverable coming in, then he would hold that clearing.
What I love about this is that it's saying, like, there's like things build up and they need to be cleared out, but the clearing is like a promise. It's not like, can I give you some feedback, which is like, oh, that just feels like a wound. Holding a clearing is, we're going to move forward. We're going to clear the air, and it could be on any side. So that's great. Okay, so option one, maybe hold this for performance review. Option one is clear the air, like and maybe it's, I brought a few books that I thought might be helpful. And this one, of course, is Kim Scott's Radical Candor, to kind of sit down and hold a clearing on this and practice some of the principles in Radical Candor, like be clear about your intent to be helpful. It's one of like the core principles behind good multiplier leadership, is like making sure your intent matches the impact. So let people know what you intend, be precise, build that trust, take criticism yourself, the way that goes both ways. So that might be a second option. Another is, I thought maybe you might want to do a 360 assessment, so that this person is getting feedback, not just here's what I have as the boss think, but here's kind of how you're perceived broadly.
Kind of to place their performance within the space that they're working.
Give them context and give them information. That was one. And then another option, and I've seen a lot of people say this, is I would ask them, and this is kind of a form of this radical candor, or this clearing, is to kind of, and I wouldn't ask them about their performance. That's probably not what I would do in this situation. Like, so do you see yourself as a top performer or bottom performer? I would probably ask this person to assess the impact that they're having, not their effort, not their.
Don't rate yourself, rate your impact.
Rate your impact, because it creates this distance, which creates some psychological safety, which is like, do you think your work is having impact? And I think that opens up an opportunity to create more congruence between how they see their impact and how you see their impact, because people can be smart and capable and hardworking, but can be lacking impact in their work. So this to me seems like one option. And then with that, to help that person know how to channel their capability. I want to share a couple experiences I had at Oracle. 2 times where I got some of this corrective impact. One time when my job had just expanded in a very significant way, and I had been dealing only with the internal side of education, and now I was responsible for big swaths of the commercial business. And my boss said to me, this is John Hall, and he said it with just all the love in the world. He's like, Liz, right now, like the work that you've been doing in the past, leading like the internal, he's like, it's A+. And I'm like, yeah. And then he's like, but the work that I need you to do kind of on this like new frontier, he's like, it's kind of B-.
Mm,
And I remember my initial reaction, which is kind of my initial reaction to all feedback
Mhm.
that stings, is like, well, what do you
Mhm,
know?
mhm.
You know, like,
mhm.
or maybe like what you need me to do is the wrong stuff. So like once I got over that initial sting, I'm like, oh yeah, it's not that I'm a bad performer. It's not that I'm doing bad work. Is I'm strong at the stuff I've done in the past, but I need to figure out how to put that same level of skill and
Mhm.
energy toward the future. And it really helped me to redirect
Mm,
my capability. And it like, because he's seeing B- and I'm seeing A+.
mhm.
And that really brought us
Yeah,
together.
that's interesting. Yeah. So
So what would you do? Like, given all of this, and should we maybe ask people on chat, what would you do? Should we put a poll out? Here are the options. What do you want to do, Shawn?
well, let's do this. Why don't you all do a double click? If there's something you saw in chat or something that you heard, what do you think was like that you just would like to double click on? I'm reading through. I want to know what's the scarf, the SCARF in these conversations. I'd
Let's
love to
ask a
know.
nerd.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Lauren, could you
Or we
unveil
could ask
this
Chu.
for us?
Or we can ask Chu. I've heard scarf before, but I can't remember it in the moment. So Chu could
That's
either give
David's
us.
rock model scarf. So okay,
Oh.
so Keith says focus on the effect, not the activity. Okay. Anybody else a double click on an idea that you think is critical to nailing this situation? I'll just wait here. How about you, Liz? If there's like, what's your go-to in this situation?
I think my go-to, I don't think I would do a 360. I wouldn't wait for the performance review. And I don't know that I would sit down and have a performance conversation.
Mm.
I think what I would want to do is just talk about impact.
Mhm.
And I think this would be a time where I would want to channel like that multiplier mindset
Mhm,
that, you know what, people are smart
mhm,
and can figure it out. And, you know, if I've learned anything
Mhm.
studying multiplier leaders, some of the best leaders in the world, some of the worst, what I've learned is really about contributorship. And what I've learned is that people come to work every day desperately wanting to contribute at their fullest, to have impact, to be what I call a difference maker, not a position holder. And I would approach this person with the assumption that they want their efforts to have maximum impact.
Mhm.
And I think I think in framing it around impact rather than performance, I think it creates a lot of room to maneuver in that conversation. And I don't mean manipulate, I mean just for people to move around and explore things and to bring the self-perception and other perception together.
Yeah, that's like they bridge that gap. You go to here's what I really want you to accomplish. This is what success looks like. Where are we? Now that's an interesting conversation. And it's not an assault. It's like, hey, we're trying to get to here. This is what success looks like. This is the finish line. And so that way you can both assess the gap between the two. That's a less threatening conversation because it's a lot. It's not about judgment. It's about like I'm just trying to help you get to the impact. I want it and you want it.
And John here says a 360 on someone with emotional intelligence issues may be seen as a threat. And I brought this other book. I don't have Amy's Fearless organization book in paper. It's on my Kindle, but I would really anchor in some of Amy's work on psychological safety here, which is how do you create ample psychological safety in this conversation to be able to talk about because it's an awkward gap. And I think the more that we can get out of performance, because someone being a top performer, like that really benefits the organization. But if you frame it in how to be more impactful here, it's a conversation that benefits the organization and benefits the individual because everyone wants their work to matter. Someone said, what's Amy's book? Fearless Organizations is one of her books on psychological safety. She has a new book out.
Her second book is Teeny. And then her third book here is Right Kind of Wrong. Just came out in September. You should totally go get it. It's really good work. I've just started to read through it. It's a fantastic piece of work.
Okay, you're ahead of me. I've got it on the top of my reading list. Okay.
Let's take a look at situation 2, but maybe we do it. Did you have something?
Yeah. Okay. Before we go into situation 2, now's a good time to start submitting a challenge for us to address live.
Ah, good.
Okay.
And what we're going to, so let's bring up real quick, what does a great challenge, or what is the success criteria for a challenge that we can work together live when we get there?
Because if you send us like 4 paragraphs, we're not going to be able to process all of that.
Yeah, so let's bring those up. And while you're doing that, let me just set the stage for situation 2. We're going to do this. We're going to do situation 2, let's do it in rapid fire, because we want to make sure that we leave time to really go through your live challenge. So I'm going to read it out. Well, first, let me just give you all a minute to just take a look at this. Brief, relatable. We want anonymity. We don't want to name anybody, especially if they're on. We don't want any career limiting moments. There's a clear question in it. And yeah, of course, we want it clean.
Yeah, it's a family show.
Yeah, this is a family show. Yeah, PG. So think of right now, what is a challenge connected to feedback that you'd like to explore for the last part of our time together? And so what we're going to do in the next 5 minutes, which is ambitious, I know, we're going to take on another question that reverses the lens. I'm going to read it out loud here.
But man, does this one happen all
the
time? I cannot tell you how many people come to me with this particular challenge.
So here it is. We just started reading multipliers in my workplace. We all took the quiz. This is the accidental diminisher quiz, and I scored 16 and felt like that was still too high, and I had some work to do. And on the accidental diminishing quiz, if you haven't taken it, higher means that you're doing more accidental diminishing. Lower means you're doing less. It's out of 50. So this 16 is a pretty low score. My supervisor was proud to share that she scored a 35. How can an employee respectfully share with a boss when they are being a diminisher? Is there a way to help them grow and change? So what's the heart of the issue here?
Well, this is a matter of someone's self-perception not matching other perception, but it's a mirror situation where the manager thinks they're doing a pretty good job, but other people are experiencing the diminishing.
So just curious, how many of you have experienced this where your boss believes that they're getting more from you than they are, and you can see that there's a pretty significant gap? Has anybody had this experience? Just go ahead and put that in here.
It might be better to say, has anyone not had this experience? Because so many people have had this experience. I've had groups come to me like pleading desperately, will you come in and talk to our boss? And, there's this assumption that somehow, I don't know, my mere presence or, ooh, maybe we should just drop the book and run. Early on when this multipliers book came out, we had people on our website ask if we could run an anonymous book delivery service, which is like, can I just give you my boss's name and can you anonymously send the books? And at first we thought, what a great idea. And then we realized it was really a terrible idea, but so many people are dealing with this. Now, again, we've got this perception issue, and there's a self-awareness thing here. And maybe why don't we start our troubleshooting on this one by, let's do the Ask the Nerd up front.
Yeah.
Like, Lauren, well, what is some of the literature on self-awareness? And particularly, I pulled together a book I love from a researcher I really admire, Tasha Urich. So give us a little bit of guidance of how self-aware are people, and particularly managers?
Not at all. One study, I will drop links to all of these studies I'm referencing once I'm done talking, but one study compared how self-aware people thought they were to how an objective professional assessed them, and said that 95% of people think of themselves as self-aware, and actually only between 5 and 10% of people were actually self-aware. Another study found that when they gave people a test to assess their own self-awareness and then had a professional do the same thing, a correlation of 1.0 would say they were perfectly correlated, exactly the same. A correlation of 0.0 would show they are diametrically opposed. And the average correlation was 0.29. Not very self-aware. And when it was on work-related characteristics, it was even lower than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, for those of you who have joined us, who are familiar with this idea of multipliers and accidental diminishers, and we get so many people saying, I just love the accidental diminisher. Like, let's dig into why that really works. And it has a lot to do with creating just enough safety where people can enter into this self-awareness conversation. It just creates enough safety to drag people across that line and get that line a little higher. This is the quiz. Someone's, scored what, 16, the other person 35. So let's talk a little bit about this quiz. So if you're using it in your organization, I had someone come up to me several years ago and they're like, hey, I took your accidental diminisher quiz and I scored X, which I was excited about because it means I'm not an accidental diminisher. And I said to this person, I said, do you mean the self-assessment quiz? And they said, yes. And I'm like, okay, so that score essentially tells you that you don't think you're an accidental diminisher. But it doesn't actually say whether you're an accidental diminisher. It really, in some ways, is it a derivative of that? But it's do you see your accidental diminisher tendency? So in many ways, what you want on that quiz, you want a high score.
Yeah.
Because what that says is you can see all of these things in your blind side. Yeah, it's you're aware of this. And then the fact that you look then at, and we share with the quiz taker, here are things you can do. You're like, oh, I'm aware of my accidental diminisher tendency. So having a high score is actually not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's a badge of honor in the self-awareness department.
So let's hit it. Let's get to a couple recommendations. What do you do in this situation? Your boss doesn't see it, you see it, and let's get a few folks chat in what you think. Liz,
I've seen some good things. So one thing is we talked about like give someone the book. Clearly, I mean, you could do that in certain conditions and with a certain relationship, but clearly, the group is already studying books, so that has not been the silver bullet on this. You could go with the confront strategy and sit down and give, some feedback, some radical candor. I generally don't recommend that. I think it takes a certain level of trust. Like if those conditions were right, someone probably would not be raising this as an issue. I've already seen one of my go-to strategies, and one that I probably recommend. Someone said in here, and I wish I could remember who, and Kathy, I love that you said I was gobsmacked when I found out my accidental diminisher score. I teach this stuff, for God's sakes. Oh my goodness, that's so great. But I can't see who did it. But someone said I would talk about my own accidental diminisher tendencies, which is a big part of the way forward on this.
Yeah. So there's a quick little bit of an assessment in this for me. So if I'm in this situation, my first question is, okay, where are we at in terms of like accidental diminishing to real diminisher? Because I think the bigger problem here is when we know that unless we just struggle to confront things. If you've got somebody that they're pretty clear, they're an accidental diminisher, they mean well, you can ask yourself, what's their intent here? That's an easier conversation to have with somebody who they believe that
they're an on-purpose diminisher.
Yeah, they're an on-purpose diminisher. So you're in this situation. So how do you deal with that? And I think that there's this interesting thing we found in the research that you can look for in the dealing with diminishers chapter, but it's so simple. And I think that it really works. And that is to just be curious, like, what are they needing here?
Yeah.
To just slow down. It's hard to do. Ask the question, essentially, instead of asking, why do they do these behaviors? It's like, what are they needing behind these behaviors that they're not getting that I could consider to try to, as I'm curious about that, I can step into a space with a little bit different of a mindset on, can I be part of the solution here? Maybe to even try to help them get what they're needing here.
And I like what you're doing here because like my first reaction would be to like, why are they doing this? But you're doing something more specific. You're saying like, what is it that they need? It's a what question, not a why question. I want to go to Lauren. Lauren, you already came off camera because you that there's like a little bit of research about when we go to why versus what, it doesn't have as much effect on self-awareness. So what do we find there?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I need to get myself like a doorbell noise that I like interrupt you with, be like, ding. But you knew that I was going to jump in here. Yeah, one thing that we find is that Introspection actually doesn't improve self-awareness all the time. One study measured like self-awareness, insight, and introspection, like time spent thinking about why you are the way you are, and found that it was actually negatively correlated. Like the more introspective people were, the less self-aware they became. This is in part because when we ask ourselves why, we're quick to like ascribe a motive, to come up with a reason. We invent a reason, and it feels right, even though it is often wrong. And then when we're challenged with that, we become defensive. We have something we are clinging to. Um, One interesting study found that they asked one group of students to fill out an assessment that was all questions about why, like why are you the way you are? Why do you behave this way? And they asked a different group of students to do a similar assessment, but it was all about what type of a person you are. What do you think about this? What have you done in this? And the why group afterward, when they were given kind of an analysis and some feedback, was very defensive, not receptive to feedback. They had kind of written these stories for themselves and clung to those. Whereas the what group, they were looking at the specifics of how they interacted with the world, and they were open to feedback and change.
I love it. And so I love that you just naturally, intuitively went to what is it that my boss needs that they aren't getting. And I think you can also look at like why do they need that? Maybe someone's bearing down on them, like maybe they have a really deep need for control. Like what has caused them? Like did someone beat them up for not micromanaging? And so, but really focusing on the what, then it's like, then how do I give them what they need so that they can be a good leader to me? And Shawn, here's what I would go with that as well, which is when you are in a situation where you are being led by a diminisher and an accidental diminisher, like trying to change them rarely works. Maybe figuring out what they need and getting them that can build some space and some trust that like they're getting what they need. And when they get what they need, they can back off and give you space to breathe and space to think and space to, be creative. But I would go further with this. What I would do is focus on what you need from them, because you're not getting the kind of leadership that you want. But then I would reverse it and say, instead of staying kind of a victim of their either abject diminishing or their accidental, well-intended diminishing, is like, what do I need from my boss for me to be able to do great work? And so rather than wait for them to figure out this gap, wait for them to close this gap, I would just direct them as to what I need from them. Like, for me to be able, and I've had to do this with some clients who, and it's sort of shocking sometimes how many organizations bring you in to help reduce diminishing leadership and then micromanage you in the process. I'm sure this has happened to you. It's probably happened to all of us in one form or the other. But like when I find myself being diminished and like told how to do what I do and like, feeling this, I rather than try to change that person or even help them see it, I'll say, I state my intent. I want to be able to do a great job here. Here's like the impact that I want to have. Here's my intent. Like I want to do a bang up job for you. And for me to be able to do it, here's what I need from you. What I need is like overall guidance about what like the imperatives are, what outcomes you're looking for, what are the parameters. And if you give me that, then I can do this for you. And I find that sort of like if you can give me this as my leader, my boss, my client, my customer, my stakeholder, then I'm going to give you this. Now, a lot of times we do this is what I need from you. But when we pair that up with this allows me to do this and have this impact, now there's a deal. And people are like, yeah, okay, I'll give you what you need to do great work. So I'd focus on like, how do I help that person create the conditions under which I can do great
you
work?
got to show your cards. You got to figure them out and you got to show them. And that's the makings of a great deal. I like that you hit that's what negotiation is really about. It's about both sides, and it's a negotiation.
And I think the promise in this approach is that you're now, in some ways, you're being the multiplier,
Mhm.
the group you're multiplying up, but you're now creating the conditions that would allow someone to move more to the kind of leadership. It's creating a draw for them to be the kind of leader you want them
Mhm.
to be.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have to create those conditions for
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah.
Okay, we've
Okay.
got 15 minutes left. We are kind of, Shawn, I think for the first time, you and I might be tracking on time.
I
This is
actually
a
didn't
first.
believe it, so I sent Austin just to double check to make sure that we weren't done in a minute. And I'm so
That we were
pleased.
over
Yeah,
10?
because we're always over time. And I was so pleased to learn that we are right on time.
Okay, we are ready for our third challenge, the third leadership matter, something you're struggling with. But this one we're going to do live. No prep, just probably be good to put that criteria up one more time. What are we looking for? Like, what's a really good, and we're going to ask people to help us figure out which of these challenges is interesting for us to put our
Feedback
heads around for
challenges.
10 minutes.
Yeah. So in the realm of feedback, what is something that you're grappling with, a challenge right now that you'd like to discuss? Okay, let's
And
see.
again, a good question is brief-ish. It's relatable, meaning it's one that is not just relevant to the person asking it. It's kind of has some universal
No names.
applicability. There's a clear question in this. It's
Clear question. Clean. Of course it's going to be clean.
okay. Yeah, but we want to, anything that, names someone, or we want to keep that out. Why don't you go ahead and read us the top ones?
How can I hold people accountable without being micromanaging? We get this question a lot in our company. They end up micromanaging the team, or it's their perception that they are. So they're not trying to macromanage, but in the process of trying to hold people accountable, it comes across as micromanaging.
Okay. Well, and this, I think this is a good choice because we hear this a lot, which is, hey, I want to be a multiplier leader. I want to be a leader who creates space for people to do their best thinking and their best work. Like, I'm all on board with that, but yet I've got some people breathing down my neck and I have deliverables. And how do I hold people accountable without becoming a micromanager, a diminishing micromanager?
Yeah, and I want to color it a little bit. So are we going with this one?
Yeah, we're doing it.
So thank you so much. Was that come from Sue? Thanks for submitting that question. I hope I got that right. So I was doing a presentation with a client the other day. They do a lot of high stake works with the Department of Defense. And a gentleman, very sharp, rose his hand in earnest and said, listen, we do mission critical work for the warfighter, and we can't afford to fail on almost any deliverable that we give to the US government. I have to micromanage.
Yeah.
But from a survey perspective, what was growing underneath among contributors was the sense that people were being sorely micromanaged. And so you've got this situation where leaders are like, we're doing this high stakes work. We have to get it. We've got to hit the deadlines. There are consequences, and that could mean life along with revenue. And so we have to lead that. We have to micromanage. But then you've got a massive group of people that are saying, I don't know if I can stay here. This place just is micromanaging me to death.
Yeah. Feels like a death spiral. Okay. So before we jump into like, what can you do as a leader? I want to talk about accountability. Now, I was coaching an executive. He ran a big global IT organization. And so I was doing what I would do normally in coaching executives. I was gathering up 360 data through interviews with his direct reports, his managers, and some of his peers. And one of the things I was struck by is how many of his direct reports, the people he managed, said to me, like when I asked, like, what could this person do to be a better leader, a more effective leader? They said, we wished he held us accountable. And I didn't hear from one person. I heard it from a bunch of people. He was a super nice guy, really trying to be a good leader, was very affable. But why would his people on his team want him to hold them accountable? And again, it was this reminder to me that people aren't looking to be let off the hook.
Yeah.
People want to contribute. They want to contribute at their fullest. Like, why would...
And they do their best thinking when they're stretched and slightly uncomfortable as well. I mean, that's how you get to your best thinking, is that you're being stretched and held accountable for that stretch.
Right.
So this is deep in people's need to be fulfilled.
Right. And I want my boss to hold me accountable because I'm going to do my best work. But I also want my boss to hold this guy over here accountable, because like we all need to be accountable for all of the pieces to come together. And so I think people, what I want to put out there is I think people want to be held accountable, because let's think about it. I want to dig into this just a little bit more. When we don't hold people accountable, when we're like, I don't want to micromanage, like, I'll just let that slide. What is the messaging that gets sent? And would all of you put this on chat? Like, what's the messaging, the subtext that gets delivered when we kind of turn a blind eye to something, when we let it slide, when we kind of ignore that someone didn't get it right or didn't get it done? Like, what's the message that's sent in our behavior?
Yeah. So love to see that in chat. Okay. Silence is acceptance. When we don't address it, your work doesn't matter. We lack integrity. The behavior we tolerate is the behavior we promote. Unfortunately, Kira says. Sue says, I don't have to be 100%. It's okay to glide. We're like, we're mid here. Jessica says, we say that we start to say that this is okay. This kind of works okay. And that what Debbie says, that what or the how doesn't matter. The what or the how doesn't matter. Thank you for that. The work's not important. So we've got this theme like, okay,
And the
work's not important.
And I think it goes even further, which is your work's not important, which means you're not that important. Like, what you do doesn't matter. It's not critical. Like, somehow we can get by without you, which actually sends this incredibly diminishing message. But yet when we hold people accountable, like, Shawn, what's the message that gets sent? And feel free for others to put this on chat, but like, this, like, if you were to hold me accountable for something I agreed to do, like, what's the message that you're actually sending to me?
Well, I'm clearly saying that I need you. I need what you can do. And without it, we're going to fail. That you become critical in the organization. And I mean, I remember the times in my career where I've contributed and someone's used my work, and that's been a delight. When I didn't think maybe that my work was I didn't know if maybe I was younger and I was contributing, and then but I did it anyways, and then they used it, and it was just like, oh my gosh, they used my work. That's so brilliant. It's the thing you want to tell your spouse, right? When you get home, or your friends or your parents.
They use my stuff.
They use my stuff. And then there's this other side which says, like, if the times when my work hasn't been used, the first thing that I go to is like, oh my gosh, why am I here? What am I doing here? What game am I playing here?
Yeah.
Because in an instant, I question my validity as a whole.
Absolutely. So I think where I would start with this is to remind ourselves as leaders is that holding people accountable is sending all the right message. It's what people need. It's what people want. And I don't mean holding people accountable to unreasonable standards or gotcha or like micromanaging just for the purpose of holding people accountable. But let's start with that as like an assumption, is that actually my best path forward is to hold someone accountable for reasonable standards. Then let's talk about some things you can do as a leader. I've got a couple in mind.
So what can you do and let's talk about this at two levels. What about the level of, let's say that you're responsible to try to help leaders in your organization, and you've got some leaders that it's being reported that they are really micromanaging people. Like, what's the first thing that we need to consider in that situation? And then let's move into like, maybe what questions should I be asking if I'm in that role before I move to action?
Okay, here's where I would go. I would go to, so we know the principle is holding people accountable is virtuous as a leader, done well. A couple practices I would think about. Number one is like, have you made it clear where the highest stakes work is? And so I would use the make space for mistakes practice here, which is, the over here, this kind of work, we can make some mistakes, we recover, like maybe deadlines can slip, quality can slip. These are our playgrounds. But over here, this part of our work, these are freeways. Like, a little bit of mistake, can do a lot of damage, or not getting something done or not getting something done well can really have harm to the organization. This is where I'm going to manage the tightest. Over here is where I'm going to manage the loosest. So I would make sure that my team was pretty clear on, okay, this is the place where accountability rules.
Yeah. So I'll jump in there. I think that that's wonderful. And if you're in a situation where, going back to that example, where what if the pushback from the managers are, but we're doing mission critical work, we can't fail at any of this, where all the things that we're doing fit in the not okay to fail category. Well, then what you can do is you can, if failure is inevitable, whether or not you don't want it. So here's the reality. So I asked, as I've worked with clients, I've wondered, well, in this environment where you're in a all no fail zone, are there failures? There's failures.
Then it's still not fail zone.
So failure is going to happen regardless. And so what can be done, and I think that this, I saw an organization do this really well, is they said, well, if we've got a lot of failure going on in the no fail zone, we don't want to tell people that it's safe to fail here. Let's double down on learning from those failures.
Yeah, it's a great path forward. Now we've just got a couple minutes because we do want to end this on time. I would really focus on defining the finish line on this. And I would go back to those 3 whats. I might add a 4th what to this, which is, have you as a leader communicated, here's what great looks like. Here's what done looks like. Here is what's out of bounds. And here are the resources you have or don't have. Like, people need to know all of these parameters for them to know what they're being held accountable for. If someone is in jeopardy of failing, like, this is a great chance to just check in, which is, here's what needs to happen. Like, what challenges are you dealing with and what help might you need? What help could you need? And offer just the tiniest bit of help, but then remember to hand the pen back to them.
So we're going to meet up in a month. Our next session is on November 2nd. And what we'll do is we'll reach out to you to ask, what challenges would you like to talk about? What questions you have that you really want to explore. And then we'll look at those and select a topic for next month's session. So stay tuned.
So we're just excited. Come back. We're excited to see what kind of challenges that you have for us to talk about with you. But until next time, I think what we at the Wiseman Group want you to remember is that leadership matters. Your leadership matters. The way you show up and contribute matters. The way that we treat people at work matters, and that we all have an opportunity to create a better workplace for everyone. And that's really what we're about. How do we create a workplace where we increase impact and multiply intelligence? So see you next month. Lauren, thank you for weighing in with evidence-based insights. Austin, thank you for running the show. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful week.